So if you're between the ages of 17 to 21 and you're in university, then you're probably facing a lot of problems. But one of the most common problems that I hear and I get asked is, how do I study when I'm not motivated? So that's exactly what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to go over these psychological principles behind not studying and not being motivated, and how to address them and solve them using principles that are actually backed by science. If you don't know who I am, my name is Katkov. I'm the founder of UofTearless. Back in 2024, I went from my lowest grade ever to the top 4% of all students in my program while only studying 2 hours a day. And I am a fourth year in university in the psychology specialist program, studying memory enhancement and adaptive learning. So basically all I do is I learn how to learn faster. So let's get right into this. Let's dive into the psychology behind motivation, discipline, and getting work done when you're unmotivated. So what is the first thing that we need to address when it comes to studying when you're unmotivated? Well, this is kind of a two-part question that you're coming at me here with. So the first part is, how do I start studying when I'm unmotivated? And the other one is, how do I continue studying when I'm unmotivated? So this video specifically is going to address, how do you start studying, right? How to study. We should put it in here, how to start studying. Now that we've got that out of the way, because I'm going to make another video on how to continue studying when you're unmotivated, starting comes down to procrastination, right? Let's put a label on it. So procrastination. In a lot of senses, this is the root of all evil when it comes to being a university student. We've all dealt with it. I dealt with it. By the way, guys, I have ADHD, so I know what it's like to really not be motivated, right? Dopamine is all I follow, so it doesn't matter what the consequence is. I'm so unmotivated to do anything unless it actually has, some squirt of dopamine that I can absorb. So yeah, procrastination. How do we deal with this? Well, procrastination happens for two reasons. The first one is a lack of known energy. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, in psychology, your brain is wired to make sure that you don't overextend yourself, right? That's the whole point of stress and the exhaustion phase of stress. That is the whole point of keeping you safe and at home. That is the whole point of just avoiding things that are painful, right? You do not want to overexert yourself. So unknown energy basically means that if you have a task that you need to do, a lot of us, we just won't even look at the instructions, okay? So we don't know how long something is gonna take, which is a really big problem, because then the brain has no idea how much energy it needs to put out to give you to complete this task, and therefore it's perceived as dangerous. So the whole point of knowing how much energy you need to extend is that if something happens, your brain wants to save a reserve of energy to keep you safe. And so if it thinks that you're going to go over that limit, then it's not going to give you energy to go, because it's like, that's too dangerous. We don't risk that. So unknown energy. The second thing is a lack of perceived importance. What does that mean, Simon? Things are important, we know that, right? But it's perceived importance that's important, right? It's something that's important enough that you need to get it done, right? And so when you have something, let's say you have a big project, right? You start the semester, you're like, I'm gonna lock in this semester. This is the one, right? And what happens? Within 2 weeks, we're already off track. Why is that? Well, because nothing is close enough to the exam to really, make us get frantic and try to start studying, right? We're like, oh, it's so far away. It's not that important. I'll deal with it. I have more important things to deal with right now, right? How many of you said that? Okay, so lack of perceived importance, right? It's not something that needs to get done right now. So how do we deal with this, right? That's what causes the unmotivation to study, right? You don't want to do it because it's not important enough, and you don't know how much energy it's going to take. Could be a lot. Assume it's going to be a lot, right? Because that keeps us from doing it, and it's painful to do. So let's solve these one at a time. First of all, lack of unknown energy. Well, there are a couple of things you can do. One is just read the freaking instructions. Read instructions/gather information. Let's say you have a lot of anxiety around something, right? Because you don't know how much energy it's going to take. You're like, I know I need to do this. It could go all of these different ways, right? Or you're like, you're a little bit saddened by it, right? You're like, oh, I can't do it. I'm like, it's depressing. I just can't, right? That feeling of overwhelming sadness and sort of thing. So let's solve both of those, right? So sadness is caused by a lack of knowledge. And anxiety is caused by too many options, right? You think about everything too much. Okay, well, how do you solve this? Well, lack of knowledge, right? Boom, you gather the information. Now you feel capable, right? This is capability being built. Now, too many options. Well, once you have enough information, right? Gathering more information is not going to help. So what do? Well, if you have a lack of unknown energy, right? And now you know a bunch of different ways that can be done, but you're freaking out because there's too many ways to do it, right? You go online, you're like, how to write an essay. It comes up with like a bazillion videos. Just pick one. Pick one, try it out, see how it works, right? Pick. And one thing to keep in mind too is once you pick, it's never permanent, right? You can always go back and change. You can always think, okay, I picked this, I'm going to try to write my essay this way first. This person says to do it this way, I'm going to do it this way. Okay, well, you know, that didn't work out as well. I didn't get the grade that I wanted. Why? Well, because it was missing this thing. Okay, now let's figure out how to get that thing, where I'll go to somebody else. Or let's say you try that, you add it in, no difference, right? For the next essay, you already didn't improve. Okay, well, clearly that didn't work. Well, let's try something else. Boom, try again, right? College is about learning and being resourceful. That is what it teaches you. In high school, they give you everything to learn and they tell you how to learn it. In college, they tell you what to learn and then you're expected to go figure out how to learn it, right? That's the key difference. Now you know how much something is going to take. So let's say that this is the deadline. You have a here, and let's draw like a little dead guy. So we know that this is the deadline. Now you have the assignment date, and this is how long you have to do it. With the known energy, you know it's going to take this much energy to get it done. Okay, well, what do? Let's go through it. Now, you're like, all right, if I just do this, and I put in this much energy over time, boom, and by the deadline, I will finish, right? That's a big task to have in your head. You might just be thinking, okay, I just want to do this, right? I'm going to start at a later date because it's not as important right now. I don't need to know everything right now, but then you're going to be freaking out. This is going to be the amount of time that you're stressed, right? So it's much easier, even if you just spend the first day just knowing what you have to do, be like, okay, it's going to take this many hours. We're going to do it here, and that way I know that if it gets done from here to here, I can review it to here. And we're fine. And then if you do it here, right, then you have all this stress-free. This becomes a stress-free zone. And that opens the door for a lot of other things that you need to do, right? Because you have lowered your perceived stress, so you're not going to exceed your stress threshold. Okay, now lack of importance, right? Too far out, I don't care. I might as well just do it here. I'm not going to spend time thinking about my midterm because it's so far away. I'm not going to spend time thinking about the final, that's for sure. I mean, the final's like 2 months away, right? So how do you deal with this lack of perceived importance? This assignment, this essay, it's the final project. I don't need to start it now. It's the third week of school. Okay, so what does it mean for something to be important? Well, importance is usually determined by priorities. How do you make something a priority? Well, there's less time to do it, and it needs to be done because there's a result that's relying on it, right? There's consequences, either for doing it, it's a positive consequence, or it's a negative consequence if you don't do it, or both. A lot of the time it's both. So the consequences determine the importance, and the consequences are more stressed when there's less time to do it. So you multiply both those together, you get, boom, your priorities. Okay, so how much is it worth, and how long do you have to do it? If you're trying to increase the importance, what you have to do is you need to break this down into smaller chunks. By the way, this makes it easier to start, right? Because unknown energy, you break this down into chunks. Okay, now this chunk right here doesn't take very much energy to do. This is you read the instructions and you write your name and student number and the due date and the title at the top of the page. Then you just leave it. You go away, you go home, you just like chill, you scroll through some TikToks, whatever, right? This next step, maybe this one is writing the first sentence or your hypothesis. This next one, maybe you've chosen your topic, you've written the hypothesis, so maybe you write the intro paragraph, right? And then this next one, you find one source, then you find another source, then you find another source. Now you have 3 sources, right? Then you write the first paragraph, the second paragraph, the third paragraph, you do your citations, right? And you do the conclusion, and then you read over it one more time before you submit it. Now, what happens when you break it up like this? Well, It's much easier to start. Each task is smaller, right? It's easier to know the perceived energy that you're going to do. Plus, you can assign each of these arbitrary due dates, which makes it more important. So then your importance meter, right, is going to look like this. As time goes on, it gets really important, not as important anymore because you finished the first task. Really important, not as important anymore, right? But you're still on this line of perceived effort, right? You're never going above it. It's always going to be here, but you're going to spend the same amount of time because you're only spending just a very small amount of time right here at the top, right? So there's very little, like there's some stress, but it never exceeds your threshold, and it's only there for a tiny bit amount of time, and you feel really good afterwards. Why? Because your stress, it plummets. It goes down. The amount of work that you have to do, it goes down. Your perceived amount of work that you have to do goes down. And you're making progress. We know that progress is key for motivation, right? If you're putting in effort, you get no reward, you get no progress. Why would I keep doing it? It doesn't make any sense, right? That's what leads to burnout. If you haven't watched my burnout video, go back and watch it. Well, nobody's asking, how do I start studying when I'm motivated? Right? So you just start, right? So the key is to solve the motivation, right? And if you do this, you get way more motivated because you spend way more time being de-stressed. And you see progress at the same time. Whereas here, your stress builds over time until you do it, until you do the work. And you never, from the second that you start, that you know about the assignment, you're automatically stressed, and it only builds. You never decrease the stress. Now there's more of these, right? It's due here, it's due here, this part's due here, this part's due here, this part's due here, this part's due here. And these are yours. You have to assign them, you have to make them up. But if you do this and you break it down and you make it much simpler for yourself, like this is due by this date, if I stay on track with this date, with this date, with this date, then I know that I'm going to finish by the due date. It's going to be no problem. I know how much how much time each task is going to take, and when I finish it, I'm less stressed, so I spend more time de-stressed. If you forget everything that I just said, just remember this. To beat procrastination and to start studying when you're unmotivated, you need to break it up into smaller chunks and assign it arbitrary deadlines. So drop this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want more information like this, and I will do my absolute best to give you the most value possible and all of the advice that I wish that I had in first year and second year and even third year, because there are a lot of stressed students out there. I don't want you to be one of them. So with that, I will see you in the next one. Peace.